All right, we're recording here now. So welcome everyone. My name is Yura, and Elena is from Alaska chapter, and myself is from Vancouver Island chapter. And we'll be figured we'll be just kind of co-host and keep this format kind of fluid. So we have, I'll just go from who I see on my screen here. Devin, thanks for joining us. Devin is on the Ashrae Society DEI committee. And I'll move on to the next on my screen. Sam, thanks for joining us. Sam's on our panel from Alaska chapter. And Susanna, thanks, Susanna. So she is on the Ashrae Society DEI committee as well. Sarah, hi Sarah. She is our Vancouver Island Ashrae chapter DEI chair. So yeah, I figured we can go around the table here with the panelists and talk about you guys' background. Just kind of give us an idea of where you come from, what you want to share between 5 to 10 minutes. Who should be the first? Any volunteers?
Pick.
All right, Sam, you're it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam. I'm from Alaska chapter. I have been in Anchorage for almost 16 years now. Originally from India, from the southern part of India. I came up here for my education, and then went to school in Illinois. Did a master's there, and then I finished it, and then I did my internship in Alaska. And the draw to Alaska was all the nature, so I think I'm very much in love with nature. So that's probably why I'm here. And I also like whenever I feel like I have to go somewhere, I can just walk out and there it is. It's already there. And so my background, my original language is not English, so I speak Tamil. It's an ancient language. It's almost as old as Greek, Persian, Latin, all those older languages, but it has evolved over a lot of years, and there's a lot of people that speak it, but not very many up here. So some of my pronunciations are a reflection of my native language. So that probably has a little bit of tone, or an accent, as you may call it, is to it. But when I first came to Chicago, that was my hardest part, was the language, just understanding what people are saying, because America has English language, but it's derived from a lot of languages from different parts of the world. So I just couldn't grasp it, and so that was really hard for me when I first landed there. And even after I started working, it was still hard for me because I still had to learn all the local phrases, the sayings and everything that people use in everyday life. I think that's one challenge that I had. And then the other challenge that I had was just people believing me. If I have a design or if I produce some drawings, they would always verify to make sure with my boss, to see if that would work, even though it's been tested so many times. And they'd still, I initially thought that was just maybe because I'm new and I am just starting out, but it happened a lot more than what I thought it was than for a newcomer. So I realized it was also because I'm not originally from here, so people have doubts in what I do and how I do it. So I had to use a lot of references to overcome that. And so that was one of the biggest challenges besides the language barrier. And then uh, so so I think I answered the first two questions on my background and then the challenges I faced in my career. And then there was the unique challenge that I would say is more direct because it's because immigrants still America is a land of immigrants and it's built by immigrants. So there's people from various parts of the world, and but there are still people who think that people just come here just to take advantage of the system and they're not here to work. And so I had to face one of those situations before, and it wasn't very enjoyable or pleasant, but it's just one of the things that a person from another country has to go through sometimes uh, when they are in those situations. Hopefully, it doesn't happen a lot. It happened a long time ago, so but I'm thinking those things don't happen very often nowadays. People are very open-minded, and so I that was one of the unique challenges that I faced. Um, and I think the part where Ashrae comes in to help people from different backgrounds is is that just helping them um, get together. It's not really so that there's the icebreaker is gone. There's no hesitation in for one person to doubt the other person or to uh, think that, well, he may, it might not be too bad if I just listen to what this person is saying. And I think that's where Ashrae diversity and inclusion comes in, is even though we have a lot of universities and colleges, I mostly just hung out with my own little group and never really had to work with someone from a different background. But when I had to face those situations, I think that part where you have like some sort of an organization to lean to, where you can look back and say, hey, there's other people like me, so I don't feel isolated. So that's where I think that improving for the future generations, that's the part where Ashrae comes in to help them out.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Anybody want to go next, or do we need to call on
So
some?
that's what I have for my
I'll go
speech. I
next.
guess I can build on more stuff that happened during my work time and during my college time. It's probably I just have to dig through my memory to get through those things. But it's definitely Ashrae has definitely helped me. The first time that I actually got involved with Ashrae was way back in college when I went to undergrad in India, and I was searching for equations to help out with my calculations. So that's where Ashrae came in for my heat loss calculations.
Sam? Yeah, I think we can go around the panelist table and then we can have further discussion later after that.
So I'll go next. So my name's Susanna Hansen. I am an Ashrae member from La Crosse, Wisconsin is my home chapter. I've been an Ashrae member for 26 years this summer, I believe. And I'm on the board of directors. I'm the director of Region 6. And I'm also on Standards Committee. I'm chairing Standards Committee right now. So my career started, I guess, I went to college at University of Florida. I got an engineering degree in industrial and systems engineering, which at my college had a very sort of bifurcated track. either doing systems engineering, very esoteric mathematical optimizations, not really factory design, and then the other track really was energy management, and I got involved in energy management quite a bit. And then I got involved in simulating buildings, and I thought, oh, I bet you could simulate air conditioning in a building. And so I got a job at an employer that I worked at for 25 years. And so that really helped me have that stability to, stop having to prove myself. Like Sam sort of mentioned, it's kind of exhausting when you're constantly pushing a rope or trying to make sure that people take you seriously or trust you or believe you. It always felt helpful to me to have that stability of a same employer for a really long time. And I think that's pretty unusual. So as far as, how did I overcome some of my challenges? I would say in hindsight, sticking it out with one employer that was able to develop me in many different ways, I think helped to, I would say, reduce the impact of that on me and my psyche and my desire to keep doing it, the engineering work, stay in the industry. I have since switched employers, and so that has sort of reminded me of how much I kind of took for granted with a network that was sort of already there. And I would say Ashrae has sort of absolutely served as like the pivot point that I was able to stay constant in. Without Ashrae as my sort of professional backbone, it would have been very, very difficult for me to sort of leave a long-term employer and switch functions and switch sort of focus in some respects. So in that sense, Ashrae has really been helpful in the last year. And I think Devin's probably going to say maybe something similar. He would if I hadn't already said it. But just the idea that you can have that stability of an organization and a group of colleagues that you are trusted by and that know you and know what you're good at and how to play to your strengths and how to identify ways that they can help you work on your, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but your sort of opportunity areas. And so the first year now that I've been on the board has been exciting. Working on the DEI panel or the EI subcommittee of the board has made me sort of focus, how can I start to transition from being a protege or mentee, I really prefer protege, to being a mid-career mentor to others. And mentor is sort of maybe a wrong word. It could be role model or somebody who is less needing of sort of that leg up or that helpful sort of hand, bringing people to the table, making sure that people who are sitting in the back of the room are invited to participate fully. And I think with Ashrae, you sort of see that in spades. You don't normally see that necessarily in regular jobs. I guess you would see that depending on what your role is. You could see it happening sometimes where a young professional was not not necessarily sort of included at the beginning of a project or whatever. And you can sort of use some of those Ashrae skills to identify ways to be inclusive. I think one of my colleagues said it best, that the DEI, the diverse and equity thing, is all just an outcome of inclusion, that the I part is really what it is. We're trying to be very inclusive. And as soon as you're inclusive, the other stuff kind of comes along for the ride. And you just focus on the one sort of all-encompassing thing of making sure that people who are invited to the party are having a good time and enjoying the party. So that's kind of how I've been using my Ashrae service. Ashrae is also one way that I do two things or three things in one. It's professional development, of course. Everybody wants to do that, but it's also sort of my volunteerism. And so I don't have to feel the need to engage in other aspects of the community. As a single mom, I really didn't have enough time to do, things like Rotary or Kiwanis or church or other types of things where I could have really plugged in as a volunteer. And so it sort of served that purpose as well for me. So it's been a very rewarding sort of journey for me. I hope that has triggered something in somebody on this call. That's about it for me.
Sarah, did you want to go ahead? I can go. It doesn't matter.
It's okay by me if you want to go first.
Oh, okay. I can go. So hi everyone. My name is Devin Ablon. I am a sales engineer. But prior to that, I started my career as a consulting engineer. So I was a consulting engineer for 15 years in California and in Arizona. And so now I work with engineers, with contractors, with building owners on the application of different types of air purification solutions. But that's kind of work stuff, right? And so that's sort of boring. So the question I think Yuri had asked is talk about your background and your story. And so I'm going to go way back. You can probably tell, Susanna's already heard this. You can probably tell by my appearance, kind of my very distinct accent, by the clothes that I'm wearing, that yes, I am Canadian. I was born in Kamloops, British Columbia, but my parents immigrated to the U.S. to California when I was very young, and grew up in Los Angeles. And so if you've ever been to Los Angeles, it's a very dynamic, just a very culturally, economically diverse area. And it's an area where, the neighborhood I grew up in, we were one of just multiple different cultures. And so it was natural for me to see all of this kind of diversity just every single day in the school I went to, the church we went to, just a neighborhood my brothers and I played in. But then as I got to about 10 years old, 9, 10 years old, we moved to Orange County, California. And I don't know, don't look at what you see on television, but it is true. It is much more homogeneous, we'll say. And at that young age, I was all of a sudden, our family, my brothers and I, we were like the one family that stood out. And we were ridiculed, we were made fun of all the time in school and in the neighborhood. And it really, I look back at it in retrospect, and I really think, at that young age, when you're treated that way, when someone makes you feel that way, it really impacts how you think, how you develop. And I already, I mean, I see how even as an adult, issues of, say, confidence or just um, anger management, things like that, yeah, I know, I recognize I have to work harder at that because of kind of that mindset. And I'm not, everyone goes through challenges like that, but it it's it just really points to how critical, how important kind of the environment that you grow up in is, and how that impacts kind of your way of thinking. We've heard, from multiple people about how that kind of that changes the way you think, and kind of your career course. And so I really struggled with that as like, say, a teenager. But then things changed because I went off to college. I went to the University of California at Santa Barbara, studying mechanical engineering. And I found out right away that as an Asian male in an engineering curriculum in California, I was not a minority at all. And so I sort of got, it made me complacent. It made me think, okay, now I'm like part of a group, right? And that continued on as I graduated. I became a consulting engineer where I'm in an area where it's all men, right? That essentially, aside from the admin staff and HR, it was all men. And so I kind of, you talk about, one of the questions I think you had asked prior is, what are some of the challenges you face? And I think some of the challenges are the fact that as a male within this industry, um, it's almost hard, it takes work to really even acknowledge that there are biases and there are differences. And it's something that I had to come to, I saw right away. I got involved in membership promotion, and the Women in Ashrae group at the time, there was this new initiative, Women in Ashrae, and that was we were in charge of it, membership promotion. I started having a lot of different conversations about the disparity and what the issues are. And I started talking to a lot of the female engineers. I know that, and we don't want to just look at gender diversity, but just in general, had a lot of conversations, and it was troubling, and but it was also eye-opening, the challenges and things that women within our industry have to face on a daily basis. And but on the flip side, what can someone like me do about it? What can I do? Because what I think we've all been in those situations where we have these kind of women in ASHRAE discussions, and then there's, the male in the group who tries to chime in thinking that he's this, imparting some great wisdom, but it ends up just being sort of patronizing. And I just, it's kind of there's that fine line that as males within the industry, we need to be careful, be respectful, but at the same time, be, staunch advocates for what's going on. And I can go on for a long time. You'll but really, I think that the biggest challenge that we face, not only within Ashrae as an industry, as a society, is when we start having conversations about DEI. Um, there's a tendency to view it as a political discussion. There's a tendency to look at it through the lens of um, you know of politics, to a point where there are going to be people who see that and immediately just they dismiss it. Um, and I think, Sarah, before we were having discussions about unconscious bias, and the problem with that is that it's unconscious. The fact that we don't, unless we're made aware of it, unless we actively, intentionally try to understand what our unconscious biases are, we don't know that they exist. And so we act in ways that we don't know are being, that are detrimental to the people around us, and we don't see it as a problem. And I'll give you, you can cut me off anytime you want. I'll give you kind of one way to kind of the way I've seen this. And I do. We had a DEI very similar to this format. We had it for Region 10, and so we did it a number of years ago, and it was a webinar on DEI, and we thought we were going to get hundreds of people signed up, and we had 34. And I did one just 2 weeks ago at the San Jose chapter in person, and 6 people showed up. I did one in Central Arizona about 2 months ago, and I remember my coworker met me for lunch, and I said, "Hey, are you going to go to the Ashrae meeting?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it." And he said, "What's it on?" I said, "DEI." And he said, "I don't need to hear that." And he didn't go. And that happened the very next day in Boston, excuse me, as well. And so it's, again, this idea that the biggest challenge I think that we're facing is the fact that the people who I think need to hear the message the most are the people who don't acknowledge that the message is worth hearing. And so, how do we change that? How do we, without turning it into a political discussion, how do we have very open conversations about what we're trying to do, which is create more effective organizations, which is create more profitable, better running teams and groups and organizations in such a way that and using DEI as a way to create these more better functioning organizations. So that's kind of what I think of when I'm working through DEI, is how can we get that message across in such a way that it doesn't turn people off, but it opens them up to the idea of strategies that could really improve the overall effectiveness of their organization. So that's all.
That was great. Thanks, Debbie. Okay, I'm the last one, I think. I am Sarah Nikofat. I am Energy Efficiency Standards Engineer with BC Ministry of Energy and Mines. I am Chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Vancouver Island chapter, and the previous Chair of Sustainability in the same chapter. So my journey was started when we decided to move to Canada in 2007. We moved from Iran to Canada to do our PhD, my husband and I. So our first landing was in Halifax. As a woman in engineering, especially mechanical engineering, at least in my country, I had to prove myself every day. So when I came to Canada, it was interesting that I was being accepted better, much better. So I was just like, oh my God, this is great. But then after a year or so that you are there in some things that you take as granted after a while. You are at one place, but then you see the differences, people, how they're subtle in how they behave, but you see that the different behavior, it's unconscious. Like some of them were unconscious because we had different culture, and something was like shocking to me. Why these people are like that? And after a while, I figured out, oh, that's their culture. They're not rude, but they didn't know, like, I'm not rude. This is my culture. So learning about this stuff was really interesting. It was the language barrier that Sam just pointed out was interesting because in Halifax, their accent is Scottish. So for the first 4 months, I was crying every day that I don't understand English. Then I figured out I understand English. I don't understand accent. But after a while, like in Newfoundland, apparently the accent is like more local. So I could connect with students that come to me, and then we were joking. And one of my newer office mates said, "Do you understand them?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I am from here. I don't understand half of what they say." I said, "Oh, I have been here that long." Like we lived there for 6.5 years, and it was interesting. Then we moved to Calgary for my husband's job. So I could not find a job that was like mind-blowing for me. I said, I'm in Canada and I did my PhD in mechanical engineering. I cannot find a job. And I thought, okay, there's something wrong with me, or is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I am not from here? I am like, what is it? Here, I did lots of volunteering thing. Some people even didn't want me to do the volunteer thing for them because they were like, no, thank you. We need to pay you and we don't want to pay you or something like that. So somebody connect me with their managers, and I went for an interview. After an hour, he said, let me be honest with you. We are afraid of you. I said, what? Yeah, you have a PhD. You are overqualified. And I said, oh, that was a very aha moment for me. I said, oh, I kept thinking of other reasons, but that person was so honest and I was so happy. He told me, like, we think you know much more than us. So we are worried. We can't hire you because of that. I said, oh my God, what do you think a PhD is? It's a project. You are good at what you do. I was good at my project. Now I want to start like other projects. So anyway, that was a very eye-opening experience that each of us looked at it at a different angle. After 2.5 years, I could find a job not in Calgary, in Edmonton. It's interesting to know each province and each city in Canada I went, it was like a cultural shock. They're so different. Like you learn new things and you have to like, oh, these people are different. The vibe of this city is different. I worked there and then had 2 kids. I had like, when I had the second one, I said, okay, I can't be away from my husband with 2 kids. So I came back to Calgary. After a year, I figured out like in the place that I was working, this is another bias people have, is most people were single or like they didn't have kids, so they could spend lots of time in at work without charging the job. I couldn't. So they wouldn't understand my problem. That was the problem with looking in my lens, that I have to wake up at 5:30, leave my kids at 7:30, come back home at 6, and not having any time with my toddlers. Sorry. So we moved to Victoria because I said, okay, let's change. We want to change the lifestyle. This is not we can do, like we survive on it. So I was in academy in Halifax, in private sector in Calgary and Edmonton. Then I came here. Now I'm in public sector, which is totally different perspective of people who are around me, how they look at the projects and different things. So now, like, I am very fortunate, I can say, in a team that we have. They are great, like, and I think people are very understanding now because they have the same problem as me. Some of them still, like, they don't have kids, but they understand it because most people around them have kids. That was one of the challenges. And another thing is, I figured out even in private sector, I had to prove myself. But here, I don't have to, I don't feel that I have to prove myself. Like after 6 months, they understood what I know, what I can help with. So they are like, okay, this is the problem. This is how we just trust you. So what else I have to answer? That was my journey so far. Okay. Oh, one more thing was like when I moved to Canada, I was from a very religious family, so I had a scarf. That became another barrier and problems, I think. I was trying not to think about it. People look at it differently, but then I went twice to Ottawa so far. Both of them with plane. Both of them I was randomly picked for going, you need to search you. Okay, it's really interesting that I'm randomly picked, but after I never went back to Ottawa, then I didn't have my scarf anymore. But I said, okay, in my mind, whenever I go to Ottawa, there is a problem there, which may not be, it was maybe really, really randomly, but they changed my attitude, my perspective for that city. Yeah, and for Ashrae, when I came here to BC, like when we moved to Victoria, I had no community around me. I didn't know anybody. So I approached in one of the meetings, Ashrae meetings, and said, okay, I am a member of Ashrae Alberta chapter. Can I join here now, like be a part of it? And it was very welcoming. People were great. And I got a sense of belonging in community. So Ashrae really helped me to establish myself, I can say, here, and meet new people. Even during COVID, most of, like, I came 2019, September 2019, COVID hit March 2020. I met people like twice in person, and after that, all was like in webinar or teleconference or something, but still it was, I have this group. Like everybody was so friendly, everybody was so listening, and that was what Ashrae gave me, like sense of belonging to a place. That's for me for that.
We hear that a lot. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Yeah, thanks.
So our plan after everyone on the panel had kind of shared their background and any thoughts they had was to include anybody who joined the webinar and see if they have any stories they want to share, or if we just want to kind of continue a more open discussion between people, just kind of see if it goes anywhere.
We just kind of wanted this event to serve as an awareness piece and a conversation starter.
Sure.
So I think that is doing that for us, so which is great. If anyone wants to share, I see Eaton online here. If you're willing to share your experience, you can do so. If not, it's all good. Otherwise, I have wrote some notes here that I thought could be a good point to.
And we have Frey. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. And if he wants to share something.
My name is Freya. I'm on the Vancouver Island. Hi, everybody. Actually, I came in Canada in 2008. I'm a background of mechanical engineer. I start actually with young mechanical engineer, then I grow up with I'm EBB managers, then I go to the project manager, then a project director. I work overseas. Then I start in Canada. When I came, I have my own company as a consultant engineer, as a mechanical engineer. As good the topic when I see when I see it, when I have an email about DEI, because I work with multinational peoples, with all type of countries, from India, Philippines, American, UK, and all. And that's the main topic: how to keep all to keep all together and to know the culture for different people is there. This is the more challenge, and it's because we have working with a big company. We work in the mega towers, and we have around 2,000 engineers, and we have 20,000 people there. To make the people how to work together, this is the main challenge, and that's why they make. It's a good topic to hear from you, and thank you very much for sharing. At least I make just a little summary because this long journal for this. And I joined Ashrae in 1997. And when I came here also, I transferred from my country to Vancouver Island in the Victoria. Thank you very much for all the presentation.
Yeah, if I may, thank you for that. You bring up a really excellent point, and that's the fact that, Ashray is a global organization. And I think, Sarah, you had alluded to it earlier about how, when you came, different area that you're in, what may be considered rude in one area, is not considered, it's just part of the normal culture. And so often, not only in North America, but within Ashray, we view things through a very North American lens. We think about how how we do things here and what's the level of expectation, and we go through things like DEI training about what is considered what is considered proper and improper. But we have to also recognize that there are things that are considered proper and improper in different cultures in different parts of the world. And if I don't know if anyone had an opportunity, there was actually the try to really explore this a bit at the last Ashray conference, where we had sort of a cultural mixer where we talked about how different cultures, do different things. And I think it's one thing, it we as we go through our business dealings or personal dealings, I think we should always remind us or be mindful of the fact that the person you're interacting with, they may not have the same views, they may not have the same, the same, you know what I'm saying, the way they act. And so I know that personally myself, I have been caught in bad situations where I was in a different country and I did something that in the US would have been considered fine, but it was considered extremely insulting in that country. And so we need to be mindful of that. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's really important, especially since we are global, and the world is increasingly becoming more and more global through platforms like this. So thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing I wanted just to add, it was like for us, for the Ashrae, when we have diversity, what I see is people in different parts of the world have different view of their design, for example, for building. I come from a country that they had like really hot places, so they had the passive cooling that I see now, lots of study on it. They said, oh, we found this. Okay, they had this for 2,000 years. Now it's mechanical, but it was, at the time, there was nothing. But I had seen, I am from a city that was like designed like that put a small like pool in the middle of the yard, and then The basement was like 15 degrees centigrade cooler than the upstairs because it was the way that the air comes. So now I see, okay, well, people come and say, okay, we have this idea because like they were from some part of the world that they always had to deal with it. And sometimes it's new for like colder climate because they had never had it. Now, because of climate change, they have to deal with it. So that diversity of thinking is important. Yeah, it was just something that I remember. Yura, you wanted to add something, I think.
Yeah, I just was gonna just interject here and there if people if you guys don't have any, you guys okay
What?
with that?
Can I ask a question?
Can you
Okay.
answer the question maybe?
No, can I ask a question?
Oh, can you ask a question? Yes, you can.
Yeah. No, I think you know, we're having just kind of a very candid discussion, and I think it's interesting that, we had, Sarah, you had brought up how, you were raising children, and Susanna mentioned working as a single mother, and we see that as kind of, that as a challenge in the workplace. And we have two chapters, one in the US and one in Canada, where they have very different approaches to maternity leave. And so I'm wondering if, I'd like to hear kind of different perspectives on that, and how much of a challenge that is as you kind of maybe pause your career, or how that impacts your professional growth, and perhaps perceptions that your coworkers may or may not have. That may be an extremely naive question, but I'm just
Well,
curious.
Kevin, that's a great question. And I remember, thinking recently that I wanted to do an exercise, kind of like, do you guys remember that video that they did on the internet where they had all these people like doing this running race, and they asked people to step forward if they'd, had both their parents together, and then everybody that was left behind sort of started to see how many barriers they had to their, sort of winning the race, if you will. And I kind of wanted to do another one for professional development and DEI, where it was like, you mentioned, Sarah, that you relocated for your husband's job. I really think that that's, generally speaking, more often borne by women, that we're constantly having to reboot our lives in the service to, the spouse's sort of career progressions. And it's not always that. It's sometimes the opposite. But I feel like recognizing that sometimes those barriers are borne more often by some of us than others. And some of us are, like you said, taking time off to raise our toddlers, and we might be leaving a little earlier and sort of foregoing some career advancement for that. But, I almost feel like we almost could do something like that, where we started to identify, why some of us might leave the industry early or pivot to a slightly less demanding or advancing or exciting role because of some of the challenges we've had. I was a single mom, but that gave me some opportunities. I didn't have my child half the time, so I could travel for work without really losing more than I already had lost, which is horrible already, right? Losing half your child's life is one of my biggest laments in my life, but it allowed me to continue progressing in my career to some degree by not having to, wonder, who was going to look after my child. My parents luckily were able to relocate near me, so they were a big help. But, I almost, yeah, it is a good comment to bring up. And I know that we haven't talked about it yet, but we have talked about in general at other fora, areas where we're trying to recruit, right? We have a personnel shortage in skilled professions, and we're having trouble finding all kinds of people to fill our roles. And so finding ways to keep more of our workforce engaged longer and not escaping to go do something else that's maybe has fewer impediments, fewer, challenges, fewer things that make you sigh, right? That go on a daily basis, right? And I guess you can turn anything, I suppose, into a reason why you succeeded, right? Like I didn't have an option to jettison off into a more child rearing friendly job if I needed one. I couldn't. I was the only breadwinner, so it sort of kept me in long enough that I got through the narrow part, the difficult part, and into the easier part. So I don't know.
Yeah, like in my experience was like I had two, I think, barrier. One is like in Canada, the master and PhD are not like jobs, especially PhD. In Europe, if you're doing PhD, first of all, it's 3 years. They won't like make it very long, and it's a job. So when you do your study, you're not behind your career. But here, when you do a study, they say, okay, you are behind your career, and say, okay, I wasted like, I don't know, 6-7 years of my life because I studied more than the other people. And they bring it up. In my previous job, not this one, I don't know if it was toxic environment or they kept attacking me with that you are behind your career, or why do you have your PhD? And then when I had kids, and indirectly, again, I was just like, yeah, you're behind your career because you have 2 kids. And interestingly, women were attacking me, not men. And I said, come on, you should understand this. And it is not, I'm behind my career. There are some skills you develop when you have kids, and this is life. Like I prioritize my family over anything. And it was just surprising for me. Some people just see everything as work. And the definition of what you are behind your career, what is the definition of that career defined for yourself that I'm behind it? But it was like stressful because they kept saying the same thing in different way. One of the reasons I quit that place was that they did not understand what it is to be a mom. And I said, okay, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. So I don't know if I answered your question, Devin, but I went it out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the insights and you know, you were in a place where, you know, you didn't want to deal with it anymore, so you left, and you were able to find a better place or another place where they were more understanding.
Yes, they are like great, and it is like work-family balance. They know
Yeah.
like this is a certain time I allocate. I give you the results and you want it, and don't undermine people like because of different situations people have. Especially as an immigrant, you have to do more to prove something. You don't have any community, any network. You have to build everything from zero. And we have to be mindful. Some people move in like elder age. Like I have lots of friends that they are like prof in our country, but because of the circumstances, they start from zero. And I always empathy and say, don't undermine them. They were like someone in their country, like you are someone here. They had to leave because of some circumstances. Try to help them, try to understand them. It's hard to understand when you don't face those circumstances, but having an empathy, I think it's like, just be aware. Till I'm not going through something, I can't tell you I understand what you are going through, but I can have an empathy and don't be hard on you. Say, okay, how can I help you? You know the best. How can somebody else can help you? Yeah, these are the lessons learned of some experience. I'm not old.
And then I actually had a comment about Devin's question too. Since I just was at the Leadership Weekend 2.0 this last weekend, I found it very interesting that people who are young and in leadership positions, even within Ashrae, none of the females had children, and I would say about half of the men did. And it's kind of like you have to choose one or the other almost. Or it's like if you have kids, you can't focus on your career, or, you know, like, or you have to pick one. Whereas the men, they're like, oh yeah, my wife's at home now taking care of the kids. I'm like, oh, is that how that works for you? Okay. So it's just kind of imbalanced. There's no reason why men couldn't take care of kids too. And I'm not saying that all families divide the work in that way. Like there's definitely families where men do the majority of the child rearing and child care and take care of them when they're sick and all that. But I would say overall in North America, it really did seem that either you kind of had to pick either your career or a family as at least a young female. And that kind of made it extra obvious when everyone was talking and saying like, oh, here's pictures of my kids. And it was all the guys.
It's kind of, I feel like it's kind of expectations in like at least North America, and also where I was born in South Korea. It's assumption that the women are going to be the primary caregiver for children. And I was having a conversation here in Canada with one of my colleagues. They have 3 children, and he does most of the cooking because he chose to. And he said that the bar for a good dad is very low. He would take his children to the soccer practice sometimes, not every week, just some weeks. And he shows up with the children, and people will tell him that he's such a great dad. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Yura, because it's some stuff like we are like wired, even like I am as a woman, oh, she has to do it, why she can't do it. But if the same thing, even half of it that does, they say, oh, that's great. And then I come back and say, no, that wasn't good judgment. Like, I am biased. I shouldn't think like that. If I like to do something, it doesn't mean others like to do the same thing. I shouldn't expect them. I have seen like men stay at home like for 2 years, did everything, so they're like go study, do like what they need to do. So sometimes I say, okay, maybe I am biased with that. So that's a great point, Yura.
Well, we actually in Region 6, all of the leaders that are working directly with me are women that have young children at home. Region 6, I don't know how it happened, if it was alchemy or just happened this way, but my RMCR, my regional members council representative, Maggie, has 2 kids. I think they're 9 and 11. Ashley Brown is my assistant regional chair. She has 2 young children at home. Mallory Manasir is the treasurer. She's just had a baby like 3 months ago. She's just coming off maternity leave. She's taken the year and she's plugging in just in time for CRC, getting our budget and our audit ready. But we are 75% women run in Region 6, which is unusual, and almost all of them have kids, really young kids. So we're finding ways to make it work, and they're finding ways to make it work. We're not taking credit for it by any means, but it doesn't have to be that way, I guess. And maybe we just lucked out. I don't know. Maybe it's a Midwestern sort of like Protestant, sort of like hair shirt that we wear that we can do more. But I don't know. We're doing, I think, something a little unique in Region 6, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, that's great. I think, we went through the pandemic and that led to a shift in how we think, a shift in mindset of how we look at that home work balance, that relationship. And so it caused a lot of people to prioritize, being at home, being with their families. And it caused a lot of people to switch jobs. I mean, a lot of people switch jobs for different reasons. But because we're in an area now where workforce retention is such a challenge for organizations, organizations need to find ways to have that flexibility. And I think, Susanna, I think what we're seeing is more organizations recognize that and allowing flexibility that maybe didn't exist in the past.
Right.
When an employee has to go home to take care of a sick child or to go to a soccer game or something, you know, whereas before it may have been more frowned upon or harder to manage. I think and it's a good thing. I think that organizations really have to be more cognizant of this work-life balance to allow their employees that ability to manage family, you know, their health, their mental well-being, you know, their social lives. So I think, you know, kind of one of the questions that was asked was, you know, how can we look at DEI how can we improve things moving forward? And I think, you know, if we're within, you know, if we're in positions of leadership within organizations, is to really kind of breed that attitude, that culture of taking care of the employee to a point where it allows them that flexibility. So I think, you know, whether or not someone decides to have a family or not, you know, that's a decision they can make, but it shouldn't have, you know, long lasting, you know, consequences down the line in terms of how they're able to manage their work and their family.
Yeah, that was a great point, Devin. I mean, I was like thinking, even like I'm not in a position of leadership, but I have two kids who fortunately now in a community with diverse like people in their school from different cultures, and they have great teacher who is really keen on knowing different cultures. So my older kid is like grade 2, so every year I do like our new year is different. I make her like a craft, and when she was in kindergarten, she couldn't explain what it is. I just explained it to the teacher. Now she can, and she was keen to share that and then learn about other kids. And she was just surprised. Oh, they don't like do Christmas. I say, we don't. But because you are in this country, I'll do Christmas for you because this is culture of this country. So, and it is happy event. I like it. So we celebrate it. But some people already like see it as a religious thing and they don't like it. They don't celebrate it. But it was interesting that my kid, if I was telling her some people don't celebrate, she wouldn't believe me because she didn't see any other places that they don't celebrate it. But when their friends come and say, we do not celebrate it and we don't have Santa, and she's like, oh, really? She believes that. And it is really from that young age, they can understand, like when I was a kid, there was nobody else from other culture that I learned from them. There are different things. It's on TV, and it was shown on TV. Western countries are like cold people, not good people. I came here, I was surprised that people are so family oriented. Different people are there. Even for my religion, different like interpretation of the same thing. That was so amazing to learn. And I think like sometimes this biases is not very bad because we learn that, oh, these things exist. I did not know that. Like, yeah.
I think that also brings a good point about what is a culture norm. What is being accepted in the culture that you live in the community that you're part of, and also just having the understanding or the knowledge of what other culture or people from other backgrounds may be doing that you're not aware of, like different holidays we're celebrating, for example. You don't have to be celebrating everything just because you're in North America. You don't believe it, it's what it is, but you may be celebrating some other holiday and some other people may not be aware about. So I think it's also the awareness piece there too.
One of the things we're doing with DEI, I don't know, we forgot to mention this earlier, is we've assembled a calendar of holidays worldwide to try to help with meeting planning where we're not stepping on top of someone else's religious high holidays, for example, all the time. I mean, if you look at the calendar, it's almost impossible to find a date that doesn't have something else scheduled for it, but having the ability to cross-check against that for really important in-person meetings, for example, is something that the DEI subcommittee has endeavored to do. It hasn't been publicized very widely because it just started getting developed. Luckily, one of the Ashrae staff members had, I think, a spouse who had access to something that somebody else had already sort of assembled, and it's a yeoman's job. It's very difficult to do that, and we are making an effort to try to help our committee chairs use that going forward.
That's very nice. Like one of the things that in my government job now I have is I can get 1 day off for my cultural like holiday, which I didn't have before, and I had to use my vacation time. Now I can say, okay, you guys all know this time I'm not here. This is my like New Year.
Yeah.
So everybody knows that, and it's good that they gave me that day.
And it's, I mean, you're right, Suzanne. It's challenging because there's so much to be, to keep up on. But I was at Solar Decathlon this last weekend, and they had students and faculty and scientists from all over the world coming to this. And so like every conference, there are meals and everything, but they acknowledge, if you're observing Ramadan, they have scheduled times so that you can have prayer, and then different meal stuff, things, and so it is work, but being mindful of what other cultures, what their expectations. I think that a lot of times there's this attitude, well, I'll just adjust to what everyone else is doing. But to have that, I think it made it, it means a lot when you take that step. And so as organizations do that, if we have conferences, we as an Ashrae in general, we've been criticized in the past because several times AHR Expo falls right on the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
And which is a big holiday.
Correction there, Devin.
What's
Lunar
that?
New Year.
Lunar. I'm sorry. See, I have everything. I have so much to learn. Lunar New Year.
We're not allowed to. What? We're not. Okay, I'm sorry. I need to learn that one. Maybe offline, Devin can teach me how not to step in whatever that was.
See how I just did that? That was an exam. That was a learning moment. We planned that well, Yura. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, and so that was a something that is a challenge, but something that we should be mindful of.
Right, so typically known as Chinese New Year just because of the Chinese population being more dominant in North American culture. So, I mean, on the same day, also Koreans celebrate it. It's our New Year too, but we don't call it Korean New Year per se. But it just falls on the by the lunar calendar, it's January 1st on the lunar calendar, so that's new moon of the new year. And so, and I know some other cultures also celebrate it in Eastern Asian cultures, for example. And so, yeah, I think it's more socially or culturally acceptable to call it Lunar New Year than saying Chinese New Year, just because they're not the only ethnicity that's celebrating that same celebration on the same day. But of course, different cultural backgrounds, they do different things, different food, different traditions. But I think that's pretty much where I was coming from by saying
That's
this
great.
Lunar New Year rather.
I appreciate that because now I learned that.
Yeah, that was interesting. I didn't know.
So, all right.
That's what's so great is like I feel like we keep talking to each other, and I remember being at a SWE conference once and we were talking about gender issues, and it's like it's all women. It's like this is the stupidest thing ever. Why are we still talking to each other about this? But despite that, there's still things for us to learn. I mean, it doesn't matter how woke or whatever you want to call it politically you are, there's still plenty to learn from each other. I love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, like something that I don't know if it is part of diversity inclusion, but something that I dealt with, and I was just thinking about it. So some of my problem came from like I'm a short person, So people didn't take me seriously. Or, oh, you're grown, you're an engineer, so till my hair become gray, I had that problem. I was like, okay, I am an engineer, I am like 30 years old, I am like doing this, you know? That's another thing, like people think if you're a grown person, you should be a certain height. And it had lots of challenges for me and made me like lose lots of my self-confidence on that. And it's I see it, like people comment on that. That was surprising last time, was last week. Somebody in my team commented on that and she corrected herself quickly, but that was like shocking to me. I haven't heard it for a long time that somebody commented on my height. But it was just like, people still like judge you by that, or this is something that I try, like if I'm trying to teach my kids because they have my genetics, like genes, and they will have to deal with it. And my older one is really sensitive about it now, and I try to tell her the appearance is not important. Nobody should comment on it or anything. I'm trying to teach her, but it's still, I have my own bias, because if anybody like comment on it, or when she comes and I get really upset about it, I don't want to show it so she doesn't get upset. But I have my own bias on it because of the comments that I get over the years. And I was thinking maybe this is something that we never talk about it in the diversity and equity, because we like look at people, and there wasn't a study actually that taller people are more successful because they feel more confident in their jobs and stuff. So I thought this is another point to raise, awareness of it.
I definitely feel you on that one. I am also short, so it's like people don't always take you as seriously, or in professional settings I've been called cute and things like that, and it just makes you feel like people aren't looking at you for what you can do and accomplish for them, but they're just like, oh, you're small and kind of adorable, and you're like, wait, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here or what we're doing. And yeah, or it's like almost they're looking behind you waiting to see if there's like an adult who's going to come and do it. I get that less now, but definitely earlier in my career especially, and always growing up, like they always just kind of assumed that, well, you're little, you don't know what's going on. So I think it definitely counts as something, and it should be included in DEI.
Yeah, we heard that, early on, is that so much of the emphasis is placed on gender and racial diversity, and not that there are so many other aspects that that there are people who are marginalized, that probably, unconsciously because of those differences. And, whether it be height, we heard from someone who is hearing impaired. And so, some of the challenges that they face, and when someone has a, has a condition like that, they sometimes there's a tendency, and I see this a lot with people, Sam, you talked about language as well before, where, there's a tendency for some people to just think, oh, they don't know, they probably aren't as smart or something, when that person is struggling speaking the seventh language that they know. I can hardly speak the one that I know. So, it's, we have to have that mindset that, people come from different areas, speak different languages, and that's not an indication of their, intelligence or them, as a person. So again, that's one of the things we need to kind of check ourselves with.
And something is about the like trait. I hope I'm saying it wrong. Like say it right. Like, and last week I was in another webinar. It was about like your personality. You're introvert, you're extrovert, you're ambivert, or you're somewhere between. And in most settings, I'm introvert and shy, but between my friends, I'm not. And it's shocking for them. And I say, oh, I'm a shy person. If you want to go somewhere like this crowded, and say, are you sure? You're very loud and smiling and laughing. And say, between you, yes. Outside you, this group, no, I'm not. So, oh, and unfortunately, like most of the world is like for extroverts, like around them, because they are confident, they come, say something, go, and I always say, no, give me a minute. I have to think about it. I can't give you my idea like now. I have to process it. And a new thing that I learned, as I am trying to learn more about my kids, and as they grow up, we have to learn more about the psychology of them. It's just called highly sensitive people. And when I read that, I say, oh, I do this. I am like this. Like everything for highly sensitive people are extreme. There is no between in it. Like, and we have to be mindful of that, that if this person, like I know for my kid, she becomes really, really upset if something very normal happens. Like it is not that upsetting. It's upsetting, but not that upsetting. But when I read that, I said, oh, it's extreme for her. She's feeling it so like tenfold than other people. So I have to be mindful of that. This is another thing that it's hard for everybody to like be mindful of everything. But when I read about this, I say, okay, maybe in the team that I am working right now with, some people are like this. So I should be aware of my behavior. Like if it's called like in psychology, they say mind reading, but it is not actual mind reading. This trait is like 20% of people have this intuition that they feel it, like each movement that the other person does, it has a meaning for them. They're good moderator, because they feel your feelings. So that's why it's harder for them to communicate their feeling, because they feel everything so extreme and all your feelings, so they get overwhelmed with all those feelings, stimulate a lot. So this is another thing that we should be aware of. Like people are different. Maybe I'm so aware of my surrounding that the other person can tune it out and easily go about and talk about, like focus on one thing that they are focusing on.
That actually made me think of another aspect of that, or aspect of everyone being different. I feel like as engineers, a lot of times people are expected to all finish work and approach work in the same way. And everybody ideally would approach work in probably different ways. And like some people work on things more consistently and slowly over time. Some people work better under pressure. Any number of things. And so it's kind of interesting how there are thousands of engineers and we're all kind of expected to work the same way, even though I guarantee with that many people, we're all operating in very different ways, kind of like we all learn in different ways. So it's just something that as, I guess, part of a group would be nice to help have that be more recognized. And I know Ashrae is doing that to some extent with the leadership training they offer and different avenues like that. But I think it's something that sometimes gets overlooked, like you were saying, Sarah, just because we have so many other things we're dealing with. We're dealing with, gender equality and, ethnic equality and all these other things that kind of take the forefront. But there's also so many different elements to people's personalities that would help people be more effective as part of the group if we were able to somehow acknowledge that and let them play to their strengths and put them in positions and in work environments where they'd be the most effective and feel the most comfortable. Like, I know it's okay to be out of your comfort zone sometimes, but you don't want to constantly operate outside of your comfort zone, because then you're not going to get anything done. You're going to leave that position or leave that job. It's not going to work long term. So anyways, just something that you made me think of.
And that I want to key off of that a little bit, because I was interviewed one time for some sort of LinkedIn sort of feature that never published, because I said something that probably people thought from the company was a little negative. But I just remember thinking that that's why it's so important to promote to leadership positions people of different sort of, what you just said, work styles. It could be whatever diversity you want to call it, but when I got to work for someone who was a woman, but she was also a non-engineer, and she had worked at the company for a really long time, and she had worked her way up, and I just remember thriving in that environment, and that was a slightly different way of managing me, that she recognized my strengths and just gave me as much runway as I needed. And it was so unburdening to not have to code switch or try to think in a linear way that my other bosses ever since have been wanting me to sort of fold myself into this little origami version of myself to fit into that little thing. And if we don't promote people who are different, we will never help to develop people who are different efficiently. And I don't want it to be about quotas, and I don't want us to get credit for this or that sort of advancement sort of profile, but we will get better success if we're able to let people flex differently. I don't know any other way to say it. I'm sure I probably could think of it, but
Well, I think Devin kind of touched on that when he was talking about how COVID has kind of helped shape environments at work where we're able to work in ways that might be a little bit more helpful for us. Like
Yeah.
whether it's, being able to go to that soccer game or take care of your sick child, or if it's more like having your boss recognize that you work in a certain way and allowing you to do that. But I think it's slightly improved, even just for myself since COVID, but I feel like there's still a long way to go. Obviously, it's something that's kind of a new concept, despite how many years, people have been working in the workforce. It's like this new thing, like, oh, maybe we should like address people's, like happiness in the workplace, or yeah.
Well, I like, you said it earlier, Elena, about how um, everyone's different. Everyone has a different approach. Everyone has different, ways of thinking. And I'm reminded, going back to something Sarah said earlier, earlier in the discussion about how the coworkers were saying, "Oh, going to school, you're behind." But you asked the right question: is behind, of what? And it's you're from their vantage point, you're behind their track, the road, the path they're going down. If you were on their path, then you're behind, but you're going on a different path. And I think if we acknowledge, if we stop comparing ourselves to, what other people, where other people are in their careers or what they're doing, and realize that this is the path that we've each individually chosen, and we're on that path, and, going to school, having children, that's part of that journey, then you're not behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think that when we start having that thinking, or where we allow people to say, you're not doing it right, or you shouldn't have done it that way, or you've set yourself back, it adds a lot of really unnecessary anxiety that we're putting upon ourselves, and that's going to lead to, the frustration and the, just causing yourself to overwork yourself just to try to keep back up to where other people are. It's all, we're comparing ourselves to this metric that we don't have to, because we have our own path that we want to follow.
That's so true, David. I was just thinking about like, I enjoy like hobbies beside my work. I don't like everything is about one thing. So, and the hobbies are like I do crochet, I do baking, I started painting, and they're labeled as feminine, unfortunately, because lots of men are good at that. But in my previous job, I could not talk about them because, oh, you're doing this? Like, you have a PhD in mechanical engineering. Why are you talking about this? It was like a bad thing. You have these hobbies, and like, oh, come on. But I think like, why should I do one thing where I have different potential and I enjoy them? Like, I do my work, I do my job, I love that. But if I don't do the other things, then I will be very bad at my job because I don't I have to do different things to be good at each of them. If I just focus on one thing, it's not in my personality. Some people just have to focus on one thing and everything is that, but I'm not that person, and I enjoy these things. But it was just frowned upon, and what? And again, it was from my female colleagues that was surprising to me. Why they just, it seemed to me they want to make themselves a male version of themselves. They say, no, I enjoy this, I'm doing it. You want to call it whatever you want to do, you know?
But a lot of that, I think that you're both saying a similar thing, which is it's our own self-talk that we're actually
Yeah.
fighting against. It's not even imposed on us. It's a lot of it is how we frame our own internal self conversations, our own mindset. We have the control over what we decide is who we are and what makes us work. So, yeah.
And one part about also engineering is we're not building the system and designing the building around just typical male engineers, but that's unfortunately majority of the population is for engineers.
Yeah.
It's for everyone who's going to be using the system, using the building. So I feel like this is a really important topic that we talk about to attract different people, that breaking the stereotype of engineer, like what Sarah was saying, she enjoys crocheting, painting, for example. I enjoy playing music and taking pictures and sometimes draw paint, but that's totally different from engineering. When I talk about such things, most of the times people will say, oh, that's not even remotely close to engineering. How do you manage to have like both sides? Well, I do need that aspect in my life. I do need to be, well, because I enjoy doing so. So I have to do that to do better job in my engineering work, for example, because that's my part of an outlet I need to have in my life. And just talking about this, like promoting it more, not just engineering in general, to diverse group of people, to letting them know you don't have to be one type of person to be a good engineer. And there's lots of different definition of a good engineer.
Yeah, there was something I remember that we were designing a building. Like, I went on maternity leave, and I was in contact with my boss in the previous job that I had, and she was saying you had the problem feeding your kid when she was like infant, and you joined us, and now again you went on maternity for the second one, and everybody in the room was saying, yeah, we need this, and say, okay, what about a mom's room? We have people in our department that they need it. There is nowhere. And everybody looked at me like, what are you talking about? And it was like 4 years ago. Come on, guys. You are designing a tower like it is the tallest tower now, I think, in Western Canada in Edmonton. They designed it, and they said, okay, you need for your office spaces a room for the moms that they need it. So she was saying, yeah, I just remembered that you complained again and again, I don't have any spaces, and I can't see, like, I want to pump for my kid, and I can't do it. So she was just saying, I just throw that idea, okay, think about this, and eventually she could get that room. It wasn't hard, like it's a quiet room. It can be anything. Just think about having such a thing for people.
But we have come a long way. I mean, when I was newly a mother, we didn't have any place for lactation. We didn't have mother's rooms. We didn't have a quiet room. We at that time, what else was there? There was something else that I was just thinking about. So, you know, it's worthwhile, I think, sometimes to pause and realize that we have come a farther way than we might appreciate.
I definitely agree. Like, I feel like besides actual like literal things like having a mother's room or a space like that. But it's like I was always warned when I was going into engineering that, oh, it's like a men's field, everyone's going to disrespect you. And so I kind of kept waiting for people to disrespect me, and I really haven't been disrespected yet, honestly, ever, for being a woman. But it was like this thing I was like being prepared for because it's going to happen to you. And I'm glad to say that it hasn't. I guess maybe even the opposite. I feel like people are kind of nicer because I'm a woman. And now that I'm in sales, it's almost like even more pronounced. Like contractors won't yell at me. They'll like ask to talk to someone else, AKA a man, so that they can yell at them. And I'm like, that's nice, but I'm also the one who's going to be fixing your problem. So maybe we can just talk about it and not yell at anybody, right? But it's just kind of interesting. And I've never felt like they don't respect my ideas either, which is also refreshing. I kind of expected that, especially now that I work with more contractors. I always expected them to be like, oh, where's the man in your office? I want to talk to him. He must be able to be the one who can do this design for me or help me make this selection. It's like, nope, that's actually me, and I know more than my male counterparts. Like I have the engineering degree, they don't. So if you want to actually have a real selection, that'll be from me. But I never even had to like argue with them. They're just like, oh, you're the one who does this? And then you give them something and it works and they like it. And then they actually really easily trust you. And it was kind of surprising because like I said, I kept waiting for like the shoe to drop or whatever you want to call it, because everyone was said that it was going to happen eventually, and it still hasn't. Yeah, so that's good.
It's nice to be able to get over somebody's low expectations, isn't it?
Right. or even like this weekend at the leadership event, I was surprised to hear that other women had struggled with like men being like, oh, come over here and like sit on my lap. I'm like, no one's ever done that to me. Like obviously I would shut that down. And I think that maybe that's partly why, is I don't have a personality where people feel like they could say something like that to me. And the other people said that they didn't know how to react and didn't say anything. I'm like, okay, maybe that's why this person felt like they could say something like that to them. But still, it just made me kind of happy that I have a really great network of people in our HVAC community that they wouldn't even think of doing something like that. And all ages, all backgrounds. It just seems like you guys have said we've come so far, and it's really cool to see that in action.
And there is one other thing. I think it depends on industry too. Like when I was in Calgary, if you were going in oil and gas, talking to oil and gas people were different. Than I joined the CAGBC there, and then when I went there in Halifax, like I don't know, in Canada, it's kind of like there's Halifax and Newfoundland, people are nice and are happy. And you go to Calgary, it's business-like, and it's different environment. So, and I was just coming from Halifax and going to street, say hi to the policeman, to mailman, to everybody, to a place that everybody was like, I'm late for my work, I should go. And then for oil and gas industry, it was again another environment. I went to CJBC and people were nice to me and say, this is the environment, because that was green building industry. Say, oh, maybe green building makes people happier. I don't know. It was just a different industry, or the reaction, the talking, the environment was so different in other setting that I went in that city. I say, oh, is it the industry makes people like this, or is it like the environment? I don't know what it was, but when I went there, I say, oh, I feel better now. But people are treating you differently than when you go on oil and gas industry, and they look at you like kind of, this is the word that I learned a few years ago, like condescending. Then when you go to the green building, like energy efficient people, like they're all like smiling, yeah, we want to make a difference, we want to do this, and more inclusive, I can say.
That's awesome. And Yora, did you ever get to the questions or extra things you had written down, or did we kind of just move on without that?
It's all good. Yeah, I was hoping to have more of this kind of conversation just back and forth. So this has been great. And I know that Susanna is from the East Coast, so it's getting quite late for her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, isn't it like almost
You're
11 there? 10:39 or
Susanna's
so.
on mute, I
So,
think.
Thank you for appreciating that. Yep, it's getting late.
All right.
appreciate it very much. And yeah, I think if we just go around the table here and if everyone has like final remarks.
I just want to thank you, everybody, and I enjoyed learning a lot about the other people experiences, challenges, different challenges that they had. And I feel now I'm not alone. Everybody has their own challenges. Sometimes you see people smiling in one place, they stay, and they never understand me. But then you guys talk about your challenges, and I learn, okay, I feel I'm not alone, and everybody has their own journey and challenges. Thank you for sharing that.
I agree. I really like the having a reason to talk about things that are personal and that bring us together and highlight our similarities and ways that we can help each other. And so, if nothing else, DEI has helped with that, even if people think that it's something that it maybe isn't for them. But I really like having a reason to have this third rail conversation.
Sam, do you want to? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, I can talk.
Oh.
I think I enjoyed listening to it. I think for myself, it felt refreshing because a lot of times.
Move that mic close to your mouth, would you? That mic that's hanging
Oh
down.
yeah.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's
Sorry.
better.
Yeah. A lot of times I feel like I'm like tunnel visioned and just like feel like I'm going through this by myself. But when like Sarah was saying, it's nice to see that everybody else is going through the same stuff, and Ashrae brings it all together.
Yeah, I love that that thought that sometimes we feel like we're isolated, but Ashray provides such a great community, and just to be able to connect and have this conversation, even just amongst us, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and it's being recorded, so I can watch it again tomorrow,
Yes, thank you
along with all the
all.
chapter members. But yeah, thank you for allowing me to participate in this. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to thank all of you for being here and being vulnerable and sharing things with the group and for the recording. So hopefully for more people who will also get to enjoy and benefit from this. And for, like Susanna said, finding common ground. We live in a world today where I feel like we focus a lot on our differences, especially on larger scales when it comes to things like politics and just the world functioning as a whole. We don't necessarily function in a way where we're finding that common ground. So it's nice to have these discussions where we can come together and find ways in which we are similar. And even if that is being similar in our struggles with differences. So.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Yura and Elena, for the session and all your efforts.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks guys for being here. Elena, thanks for agreeing to co-host this event. And yeah, thanks Devin, thanks Susanna, thanks Sarah, and thank you Sam, all four of you for being here and sharing your stories and opening up to us. And I really learned a lot from this event too, the just opening up and just learning about differences. You don't have to agree on everything, of course.
Yep.
But learning about different people, different backgrounds, and just trying to understand where they're coming from. I feel like that has been what the whole DEI piece is about for me. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here and donating your time for us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.